A group of teens were used to attending school, living separately and in harmony with social media and their friends. When their lives weren't as heavily affected by the world around, but all that changed when quarantine started. This is Teenish, a podcast to inform you on what's going on in the world and how it affects Savannah youth. A podcast for you, by you.
Today, we'll be starting our discussion of the juvenile justice system. We'll begin with how we could try to prevent youth from becoming a part of the system to begin with. Okay, so one prevention method to introduce in schooling specifically to not allow kids to be forced into the school or prison pipeline or into a juvenile detention center is a school safety net. And when I say school safety net, I mean something similar to backpack buddies, which I believe is where schools provide like backpacks with essential needs to students who otherwise don't have that when they go home. So I would like propose something very similar. Um, in addition to restorative practices or like a restorative healing circle, I mean a circle primarily spearheaded by a peer, a youth peer, or a therapist or a counselor that is like very relationship building and like problem solving. So, for example, instead of I'd say penalizing the kid for things that may not be that may be happening at home or for actions that occur during the school year, adults and the teens take a step back and try and analyze um, the reasoning behind acting out, how it affects the victim, how it's affecting the perpetrator, and how and what's a solution that can help everyone involved, as to not penalize one kid and not help the victim of the situation. And so I feel like by implementing those practices into schools, it could really diminish the amount of kids we see going through the school to prison pipeline.
Another way to prevent kind of what's going on is recreation, which for that you could do like juveniles could do many things like sports, uh, art, music, to get their mind off of so much stress they're pinning up, and maybe they could find a career in what they really like. So I think that recreation is a pretty important because it could point them on the right path to not be as bad as they think they are.
Pro-social activities such as after-school sports and events like basketball, football, soccer, or any school or outside of school related sports and activities.
Gary's front is like more school, it's a school front, and then Marcus's is more of like a community slash family front. So you get them on both sides. I get it. That's smart. Not to diss our education system, but it doesn't really teach you um, simple things like your Miranda rights and the full extent of what's illegal until you're well into your high school years. So, for example, I didn't know some forms of litigation, which is just fancy talk for homelessness, was illegal. I didn't know that, and I didn't fully. I knew some of my Miranda rights, but I didn't know all of my Miranda rights until what my sophomore year, my junior year, my sophomore year of high school, and so I feel like if there was a stronger foundation of our education on what the police system, I'd say, or the criminal system or something like that at our younger years, if we have a basic foundation of that stuff, we are less, I feel like we'd be less likely to commit certain things because we know it's wrong. But then, there's also that if you don't do it, you don't know it's wrong type thing. But that's something else altogether.
I agree with it that they usually don't teach others about their rights until late. So I fully agree with that, and I think they should teach it a bit early. Maybe sixth grade would be a good starting point for it, rather than like high school, early high school. Maybe family therapy, since it would be a great opportunity to, know more about your child that you already don't know, get how they truly feel out so you can understand and probably most likely help them out with their issues so they don't have to become a criminal. So I think family therapy would be a good option for those who may be struggling with this issue.
I feel like with family therapy, uh, it's a good way to like get through with the child and the family to see everything that is going around at the home, and it helps some kids with having bad behavior in class and just like acting out. So I feel like it would be a good way for everybody to understand what's going on to help the kid more to and like be more lenient with them to help them out some more.
The only like I'd say flip side or like problem is part of it is that I think anything the child will say in family therapy could possibly be used against them when they get back home. Like I think children's actions are just a reflection of their parents and their family. They're going to replicate what they see in their household. And so if they like replicating things thinking it's not if it thinking it's right and it's revealed to them it's wrong, they may start questioning their parents and thus get punished by their parents. So I don't know. I feel like there should probably be like some sort of like separate and then together therapy session where it's like they're only talking to the kid and then they're only talking to the parent and then what they're talking about together is more um I hate to say watered down, but watered down as to not hurt the child in the process.
I think it plays a big factor into it because sometimes they think that no one will help them, so they think that they could take it in their own hands with when it comes to bullying.
I think something like a zero tolerance policy it's helpful but also harmful because like Marcus said, the victim may take the bullying into their own hands. If they don't see any fixes, they may take it into their own hands and then get severely punished for it. And in their eyes, they're like, I was just defending myself. Why am I getting hurt like I'm the one bullying? So I don't really see a positive, not a true positive in this situation. There's always some negatives. I think to really um, eliminate the amount of juveniles going into, the justice system is to stop penalizing kids for doing kid stuff. Like, I understand there's vandalism, but then there's also art, and there's a fine line between that. But you got to take into account that we're still kids. We do kid stuff, and we do dumb kid stuff. And I don't think that's a facet of information that's really looked at and really taken into account before their lives are kind of ruined, I guess.
Hi, my name is Kennedy White, and we are joined today with Ms. Judge Lisa Colbert of Chatham County Juvenile Court. To start, Ms. Colbert, can you give us a little background on yourself, including where you're from and where you attended school and how you rose to being a judge here at Chatham County?
Great. Thank you, Kennedy, and thank you so much for having me on Teenish. My name is Lisa Colbert. I am a native Savannah. I did spend a little bit of my childhood in Brooklyn, New York. I graduated high school, though, from Groves High School here in Savannah or Garden City. I went to Savannah State College and then University of Georgia Law School. I have been a juvenile court judge for almost 8 years. It'll be 8 years in September. I was appointed by the Superior Court judges almost 8 years ago. And before that, I have practiced, as an attorney for Chatham County government, as an attorney for one of the Superior Court judges. I've also been in private practice, both in small and large firms.
Just to get it out there, how do you feel that your background personally affected how you interpret law in Chatham County?
Wow. So my background, so when I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, um, I spent a good part of my time, most of the week, with my aunt who lived in a public housing complex, Marcy, home of Jay-Z. I didn't know him though. And I will tell you, I learned that, it's very easy to label people. Like young people, we have questions here sometimes, do you have friends who've been involved with the juvenile justice system? I would have had to answer yes to some of those questions. And because of a yes answer, like on some of the risk assessment tools that we use, then that child would score a higher risk, as a higher risk than someone who doesn't know people who are involved with the system. So that has led me to believe that you can't just stop at that. That you can't just look at, these superficial measures of what a person is or what they might do. You have to look beyond that. Because I know I would not have wanted someone to just judge me based on the fact that I knew people who've been arrested before or who've been in the system, because that wasn't my story. That's not, it's just who I knew, and I knew them because of where I lived. So I think it has allowed me or caused me to be much more in depth about how I look at things and not just stop at the surface.
I like that. And it's very inclusive and not judgmental, as me and other people have seen or assumed judges are. But thank you for that. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Um, I heard recently that juvenile judges in Chatham County have specialties. Do you have one?
Well, we have two specialty courts here. I have the mental health court, and my colleague Tom Polk has the family dependency treatment court, which deals with adults who have drug issues, who have kids who wind up in foster care, or who are in danger of winding up in foster care. So yeah, they're called specialty programs. We don't have to run those programs, but they are geared toward really trying to address root causes, like with kids with mental health court. We assemble a team of people, a mental health clinician, as well as probation officer, educational advocate, Jessica Matheson with the Youth to Adult program, and other stakeholders. We work together to try to coordinate services and interventions so that the young person doesn't continue to escalate in behavior because of the mental health issues that they may have. And also try to help the family figure out how to address the child's behaviors.
Do you think these specialty, like you said, these specialty programs help ensure that the juveniles receive a fair trial when they come to see you in court, of course?
Well, so the trial part, the team doesn't work so much on that. So receiving a fair trial is really up to the judge and the attorneys involved. So the judge is sort of like the referee if the courtroom were a playing field, making sure that the rules are followed. But it really is a concerted effort. It has to be the attorneys as well, because unfortunately, there's some judges who don't follow the law and don't follow the rules. And so it takes a good attorney to help keep that judge in check. That's why you have appeals. That's why records are created of what happens at trial, so that an attorney who recognizes that their client isn't getting a fair trial, they know how to preserve those issues so that another court can take a look at it and say, no, this wasn't right. The judge stepped out of bounds and we need to reverse this decision.
So it's like checks and balances.
Right. Yeah, but you got to have both. I mean, you have to always have attorneys there who recognize what the law is, because most litigants don't know, most children, their parents, if they didn't go to law school or aren't well versed, don't know. So you have to have hopefully a good judge, but always if you have good attorneys, that will either sure that the judge does the right thing, or they know what to do if the judge doesn't, and they can get someone else to review it who can reverse the decision.
How would you say that this leads into bias or like eliminating bias in your courtroom?
Well, bias is a whole nother issue. I was shocked when I became a judge and took my first implicit bias course at one of my national seminars that I choose to go to. You don't have. I was shocked to learn that, one, everyone has biases. I don't care who you are. It's just normal to have biases. Most of us are not aware of those biases unless we've undergone some type of training, and usually continual training. And so really the way, hopefully the individuals in these positions of power, like I'm in, are aware of their biases and know how to keep them in check. Again, if not, you have to have those good attorneys. Most people in the justice system do not take those courses. They are not mandated by state law that mandates that I have to have continuing judicial education, 12 hours a year. And the course that I'm mandated to go to do not include implicit bias. So that is a real issue. And it can play out in a problematic way whether it's the attorney, whether it's the judge, whether it's the probation officer or the police, we mandate that our staff goes through implicit bias training now every year. So those of us who work in the system, who have authority over other people who work in the system, can require that training. I think that's the only way.
If you don't mind, could you like briefly describe what those trainings discuss or do?
The very first one, the facilitator or the instructor, she showed us pictures of two people side by side. And she'd ask a question. For instance, she showed pictures of a man in a suit who was Black, a man not in a suit who was Caucasian. Question was, one's a businessman, one's a felon. Surprisingly, very few people guessed that the Black man was a businessman, even though he was in a suit. And it shocked most people when they realized that we have all, been affected by bias. She showed a picture of an Asian person and a non-Asian person and asked, one was a gifted scientist, the other was not. Everybody thought the person that was Asian was the scientist. And so those are the types of, it was sort of that shock value that got us first. So she convinced us all that we have biases. Then she talked about how we can, you have to know that you have those biases, and then you have to remind yourself not to associate that with that person.
We've mainly been talking about like the negative side of biases, but in your history and the way you see bias in court, have you seen it be like used productively, or it's been used in a positive light?
I don't know that I've necessarily seen it in a positive light. So I always try to go into it with a hopeful lens, with a bias toward this can get better. This person can do better. They just need something. And my role is to try to help facilitate that something happening or that opportunity and support, happening so that they can do better.
That just makes me, with the whole, you're all innocent until proven guilty. That's what I think that backs up. Totally.
Right. But even once found guilty, because I deal with children after the fact, after they've been adjudicated, we don't use guilty here at juvenile court. But even once I know that you've done something, I still believe that's not all that that person is. That's not all that they can be, and that's not who they are.
Could you speak on any like underlying trends you're seeing for youth to appear in front of you in court?
Oh, yeah. So I find that young people that I'm most worried about have a couple of things in common, and this is without any mental health issues, not engaged in school or an educational program, not pro-socially engaged outside of school, meaning pro-social activities, sports, music programs. If they're old enough to work, my orders will always include things like, I want this child they have to be in a pro-social activity. If they're old enough, let's help them find a job. If they're old enough to work, let's get them into a program where they're doing music, art, sports, figure out what they like, dance, whatever. Let's help them get into that. And so those are the trends: lack of pro-social activities, lack of positive school engagement.
That's good. I mean, I would see that, and of course, like court shows,
Yeah.
where that should be like, you have to do community service or something. You have to do XY program, and it forces them to interact with other people, and I never like truly understood why. But with you explaining it, it's like, okay, now I see the purpose of doing this. This is my last question for you, and this doesn't necessarily pertain to anyone but kind of you. But how do you provide yourself with self-care so you don't experience burnout? Was it taking in all these stories?
And so exercise, good food, surrounding myself with good, caring people, and laughter. I just want to put laughter first, because that really helps.
That dopamine rush. Everyone needs it.
Definitely.
Thank you for allowing me to interview you and answering these questions to the full extent of your truth.
Well, thank you for having me, and I've enjoyed this time together.
We understand that during these difficult times, we will be talking about some very hard topics, and that can be very taxing on our emotional state. So we want to take a second to share our moments of joy that help us get through it.
Thanks for listening. This is a podcast for you, by you.
We're small now, but we could always get bigger.
If you are interested in joining, give us a moment of joy or have a topic you want to discuss, please contact us at the email below.
Join us next time where we continue the topic of the juvenile justice system.
I choked on air.
I heard. I was trying to.
You
It's
want
real
to try to
embarrassing to be the only one on video because I'd be dying. Like, and I know people looking at me. I'd be dying on the